Morning and welcome. This is Craig Spiesel from the Online Trust Alliance. I want to welcome everyone today to the webinar entitled Unsubscribe Best Practices and Audit Report. I'm excited to have everyone join the call today. We're very fortunate to have some experts on the call joining us, including Derek Harding, who is the Managing Director of Javelin Labs, and James Coons, the Chief Privacy Officer of ListTrack. A few notes, this webinar is being recorded, and we will be taking questions at the end. I encourage you to use the chat pane, and we will try to, I should say the question pane, and we will try to take your questions throughout the webinar. So for those that are new to OTA, the Online Trust Alliance, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We are supported by grants and charitable contributions and leading companies throughout the world that support us. Our mission is very concise. It's really about enhancing online trust. We believe trust is the foundation of every transaction, every connection, every email we have online. It also empowers innovation. So one of the key parts of OTA is providing educational opportunities and prescriptive advice to the industry. And today's webinar is one such example of that. We also work very much on public-private partnerships. We have over 100 organizations that work with us. This is just a sampling of some of the leading organizations that span the marketing community, the financial services sector, to government agencies. So I want to commend all of them for their support and collaboration, because it's very important as an industry that we work together and find areas of trust that we can really support and promote going forward. So walking through the agenda today, it's been 10 years since CAN-SPAM was introduced. It was signed in 2003, came into law in 2004. So where have we come? I do want to share that the foundation of this webinar is really the best practices, and these best practices really reflect input from over 100 organizations as well as government agencies, that provided input. I want to thank them for their leadership. Many of them are also supporting, publicly supported these best practices, and they're listed on our website. After the development of these best practices, we decided to then actually do an audit in which we'll go into details looking at the top 200 retailers based on revenue. We signed up for their newsletters in the last week of July, and then we unsubscribed after we received the first mailing. So we'll share with you the details on those that honor the unsubscribe, as well as how we evaluate the footer and what is the user experience, as well as some other lessons learned and related marketing practices. So a lot of questions we've received is, how is this tied to CAN-SPAM and why do we care? Well, ultimately, CAN-SPAM was really about, can you trust email? Can you trust the email marketing industry? I think we've come a great distance since this time. CAN-SPAM, I think, is very important. It's a minimum amount. And the challenge is, yes, can you trust to link it, but is it enough? And certainly I'd like to invite our panelists to share some of their perspectives on where we are and where we need to go on the subject. James?
Sure thing. Thanks, Craig. And again, that was obviously one of the bigger questions was, how does the unsubscribe mechanism in email tie to online trust? And, discussing this amongst our organization, we said, yeah, generally you get an email now, especially from a legitimate marketer. We generally feel that link is trusted, right? We know that if we click unsubscribe, that we would be unsubscribed through their process. But we thought about moving kind of past taking CAN-SPAM and saying, okay, this is the minimum required and this is what we need to do, into more of a stewardship of this and actually embedding better practices, if you will, into your company's culture. right? So there's one thing just to have an unsub link in your email and honor it within the minimum 10 days required. Moving past that, saying, really with today's technology and the platforms that are available out there for you, if you're not honoring it pretty much instantaneously, you're doing it wrong. And having that be kind of the culture and why that's important to your brand, and realizing that, in today's world, with all the news of data breaches, security holes, and things of that nature, that this is just one more avenue that we've seen a tendency of people to either A, disregard in the worst case scenarios, or B, just kind of do the minimum to get by.
Great, great. I think it's also, by the way, important here, and we'll touch on a little later here, is what canned spam is the focus of this, is this is an international issue. And internationally, the requirements are, in many cases, are much more rigid, or I should say, have higher expectations and requirements. So canned spam in many ways is the minimum. I do want to share that we got to this point, we, as an organization, many people in the press and media over the past years have mentioned to us some of the concerns about the links that didn't work, or the poor terms that were used, the poor readability. So in May of this year, we actually issued a call for public comments and received over 100 comments from government agencies, from consumer groups, and email marketers, and leading companies. And through this process, we've developed what is clearly a list of best practices. And these are now endorsed by leading companies and agencies as well. So we're going to go through all of these here. But again, I think the point here is we need to move beyond canned spam, beyond the floor, to improve the integrity of the email channel, which I think is good for your brands. And also, it's a good message for self-regulation. So if you aren't adhering to these, consumers should be asking the question, as well as regulators should be asking questions. So actually with that, I'm going to actually let James kind of kick off on the very first one.
Right. So, the opt-out copy and link, clear and conspicuous, right? So that's kind of spelled out not only in canned spam, but as we look at some new stuff on the horizon, like CASL, the Canadian anti-spam legislation, we see that in there as well. Kind of thinking back, that it's been 10 years with canned spam, and I know stuff has been written about it over the years, and you see light revisits of it here and there, but as we went down this avenue and we started looking at the folks that we did, we saw very, almost immediately that this is one of the areas that we saw issues.
Right.
You saw folks bearing the unsub. You saw an unsub link, but it wasn't necessarily stating click here to unsubscribe. And it wasn't even something like change your email preferences with some total other verbiage that was really left open for interpretation. So the points we list here, obviously not bearing in legalese and things of that nature. You want it clear and conspicuous. You want it to be easily found, easily clicked. Enough said. We say here visible from the last sentence of the body of the email, right? Again, it's kind of like a best practice there. And if we look at that last point, users shouldn't be forced to download images. I believe there's actually an enforcement action where that, and I don't recall the actual details of that, but that was actually brought up as an enforcement action where that was shown to be against the Canned Spam Act when you had an image hosted on a third party with a third party organization, and we're forcing the the recipient to download that. So next slide, I think we have we may have
actually James, one point here is, and actually the next we jump to understood terms, but on one example of the top 200 retailers, we counted 22 line spaces between the end of the body copy and the unsubscribed footer. And we cannot understand any justified reason, and clearly that would be a flagged area where it appears that the marketer was being disingenuous, and that's clearly a case for concern. Derek, I want to kind of go into commonly understood terms, and if you're on the call. So Derek has had some phone problems here, so I'm going to jump in for him and on here. So one of the challenges, which ties to a little bit what James' concern was, is the terms with companies that were not using opt-out or unsubscribe. And again, so the whole idea is really make this easy about your consumers and what they want. Unsubscribe and opt-out are really the industry terms. And don't bury it in a long sentence. Again, so and if you're going to have separate links, for example, preferences or other areas, you should actually have those linked here clearly and call out. And again, we'll go through what percent of sites that have these. And these all are very clear, but it's incredible the number of organizations that were not necessarily adhering to these. So James, back to you here.
Sure. Readability, you know, another area where we saw, we'll say, room for improvement. You know, and going back to the first point of clear and conspicuous kind of feeds into that, right? And we say as a general guideline, no more than 2 points smaller than the body. I have seen unsubscribe links that are so tiny. Granted, I am aging and I do wear glasses. I'll give you that. But at some point, it's ridiculous what some folks are doing in this respect. You know, font color should be readable as well, with adequate contrast from the back. So we've seen that typical gray-on-gray legalese footer that's very difficult to read. You know, you got to stay away from that. If we look at this example and what Craig's done here, just to kind of highlight that, when we redacted information, we used a blue, which is you know, slightly different shade, but would fit well against the gray here, just to kind of show that a simple change in color there would allow this, would provide a little bit better readability as opposed to this kind of gray on gray, where you might have a tough time. And you know, that low contrast type against this background. You know, and again here we're pointing out also with this particular example, the links not being highlighted. I see that they're underlined, yes, but they're not highlighted or bolded. I think we have, yeah, there's one here, the click here kind of at the bottom, click here to unsubscribe. That click here isn't bolded in this example. So those are kind of some of the things you want to watch out for there. Again, you know, all feeding back into clear and conspicuous. This, to me, I wouldn't say is very clear because it's just hard to read.
Great. Well, I think it's key points. And by the way, we have briefed AGs in 6 states now, as well as the FTC. And they are going to be looking at these best practices based on the wide support and embracement as really effectively de facto standards. So the message here is if you aren't complying with these type of best practices, you're really putting your business and brand and customers at risk. Derek, are you on the call?
I am. Hopefully my call will stay up now. Okay, item 4 is about a mechanism to unsubscribe from all email, and for small publishers, for small marketers, this tends not to be an issue, but it is very important for larger organizations, and especially when you get into co-registration and list rental. And it's about the end consumer. It's about can they get themselves removed and unsubscribed from messaging when they wish to? And it's significantly important. I think we have a couple of examples. If you go to the next slide, we have an example here that actually was one we experienced, where it is possible to unsubscribe from all email on this page, but it is so well hidden that the person that was using it actually didn't spot it, that right down there in the corner there is an unsubscribe from all email. This is the kind of thing that we're recommending against. While on the next slide, I think Home Depot is doing a great job. They're making it very clear you can unsubscribe from some emails, you can unsubscribe from all emails, and this is exactly what we recommend companies should be doing.
Hey, Derek, do you have, on this one here with Home Depot, any ideas of where you could even maybe take it to the next step?
For sure. I think there's always room for improving and enhancing processes. To my mind, I think the links could be, rather than simply remove me and then having to read the gray copy, if they made it clear, unsubscribe from all, unsubscribe from promotions as part of the link, I think that might make it even clearer. But I think overall this is an example of a company really trying to make it straightforward, make it clear what your options are, and make it easy for consumers to take those actions.
Right, and real quick, I'll throw in there and add something to what Derek said about changing those actual links. Is a great opportunity because you have that great brand, you're following your brand identity, you've got the orange and the white. I'm going to see that if that one button, as opposed to having the text next to it said remove, unsubscribe from promotional email, and then the following button said unsubscribe from all. I think that's a really great opportunity to be clear and conspicuous and very, very readable.
Okay.
James?
So, right, one of my favorite things, performance centers or preference centers, or as others say, opt-down. So, really a huge benefit for marketers here, right? To me, when I think about a preference center, I think this is helping you build permission-based relationships with your recipients, right, with your consumers. And it's also showing a level of respect for your email subscribers, right? You're sending a message that your communications are, not only legitimate, but that you're giving that consumer choice, right? So when you think about consumer choice, a preference center really allows you to let your subscribers do a little bit of self-selecting segmentation. And you really have a way of two-way communication here. So in the example here, and I think we kind of covered some things up here, but in the example here, we see that you can subscribe or unsubscribe from, really these two different, you have these two different types, your trip planning alerts and then your travel inspiration and deals, right? So your trip planning alerts, those are probably things that you've set up and you'd most likely want to be able to control, what you're seeing there because, you've asked for that. And then in that second section, you see the more marketing piece, right? Those are the inspirations and the deals, right? We thought you might like this, or hey, there's a great deal on this right now. And you've really, this organization's really given their recipient the ability to kind of control that, right? They've really empowered their subscriber here. And I think it's very powerful for your brand when you allow your subscribers to do that. I don't know if we have another example, but I've seen preference centers that are based on frequency as well, right? So they're say, hey, are you getting too much email? Click here, and you can say, I'd like one a week, I'd like one a month, I'm okay with daily. So again, using the Preference Center to your advantage, a very powerful tool for marketers, and really also an opportunity for you to showcase what kind of communication resources you have. I personally have, went to a Preference Center for a list that I'm subscribed on, and wasn't aware that, oh, hey, I could sign up for these other different communication resources that I didn't know they had existed. So again, kind of shows you even other avenues that you might not be tapping into that you could access through the Preference Center.
Item 6 is about ensuring, as part of being clear and conspicuous throughout the process, that this follows through into the unsubscription landing page as well. The next slide has an example of this, but as consumers receive an increasing amount of email, they can get mixed messages. They can become confused as to who is sending them a particular email and what that email is about. Anybody that's on the processing side has seen this kind of thing happen. By having a branded unsubscription page, consumers are clear and know exactly what they are unsubscribing from. And this may even prompt them to resubscribe if what they've done is selected an email that they misunderstood. Here's an example of an unsubscription page that frankly does not look like a company is really trying. It doesn't tell us what email address has been unsubscribed or what they've been unsubscribed from. And we think this is an opportunity for companies to do far better.
And unfortunately, I'll just add to this, Derek, this was not a single occurrence that we observed. And of the 200 largest retailers, we found about a dozen had similar pages like this, which is a significant loss in branding opportunity and just a poor practice.
Absolutely.
So confirmation page, I think, kind of ties really back into that. We don't want to send a confirmation email, right? So the recipient has elected to unsubscribe. What a slap in the face to then send them an email like, oh, hey, sorry to see you go. If you change your mind, click here. I can think of a large group of folks I converse with regularly that would probably mark that email as spam. And then, obviously you take that whack on your brand. But a great opportunity here is so when I see that previous slide and it just, is a plain Jane website that says, okay, you're unsubscribed, I think, okay, that's somebody who is using a platform and they just left the default setting. They didn't take the time to go in and create a custom confirmation page. We see here a confirmation page that basically says, you've been removed. Not a fan, but it does say you're going to receive one email to confirm that you've unsubscribed. At least they're calling it out here. But it gives you an opportunity to maybe collect some information, right? So why did the individual unsubscribe? And if there's any comments left in there or information, those are things that you then as a marketer could address going forward. But I like this because they used their logo. One more thing maybe I would have added to this page is the ability to resubscribe. Oh, wow, sorry, I hit that by mistake. I really didn't want to. Or at that last moment, I truly did have a change of heart. But again, this is an awesome opportunity for marketers here to, maybe have the chance to curb some list attrition. And again, maybe include a link, so not only the, hey, click here to resubscribe if this was an error, but if you have a preference center, another good place to say, okay, sorry to see you go, but remember you could opt to change your email preferences if you wish to stay on and receive, for example, less email. If someone, I've seen that before, I can't remember, I would love to recall who that was, but I unsubscribed from a daily mailer, and I got their confirmation page, and it asked me, why are you unsubscribing? And I clicked on too much email. the minute I clicked on that, another box popped up to the right that said, we do have a preference center where you can choose to change the frequency. And I thought, hey, that was pretty cool. And in that scenario, and for me, I actually chose to have one a week. So again,
one point there, James, is it's really important. That can't be a condition of unsubscribing. So that should follow the unsubscribe choice the consumer is making. So you can't make
100%. 100%. Once, and in this example, we see very large red in the middle, unsubscribe successful, right? So once they click that unsubscribe, and we love to advertise the one-click unsubscribe or the safe unsubscribe. Once they click that, yes, that should remove them. All this other stuff that we're talking about, rerouting or the chance to resubscribe, is secondary action. And not something.
What about this example, James? Help us understand this example we got.
Sure. So this was interesting, and I think to this day I'm still kind of asking what happened here. But clicking on the unsubscribe link, and then this is where they take you. You've almost unsubscribed. And jokingly, Derek and I were like, well, maybe I didn't click the link in the exact center. Maybe I just nipped it on the corner, and I didn't hit the center of the target, so I'm not getting the full unsub. But all joking aside, this is very convoluted, right? What does this mean? And there was no spot to say reconfirm your email address, as I've seen that in particular examples. Again, which I don't feel is a smart thing to do, but this is yeah. I mean,
this is to add to that. We sent mail to Abuse and Postmaster almost 30 days ago to ask for clarification, and we got absolutely no response from them. So while they may be CAN-SPAM compliant, this is a leading pharmaceutical retailer. It's very concerning that they have this practice in place. Derek?
So yeah, subscription removal. We know that CAN-SPAM and CASL permit up to 10 days for removal from lists. Internationally, that varies. It can be as high as 14. It can be as low as 3. Our position, though, is that in today's world, we're doing real-time marketing. We're sending messaging that's triggered. Our goal on social, on email, is to be real-time, and that should apply to our unsubscription processing as well. We recognize that sometimes there are back-end processes that make this challenging, but we believe that every marketer should be moving towards a situation where they are able to process unsubscriptions in real time and ensure that what the instant somebody has requested to be unsubscribed, that they receive nothing further. And we think that is the best practice, and we think that's where everyone can get to, although it may be some work to get there.
Yeah, one point, Derek, to add is we received an unsubscribe for a company that happened to be headquartered in the UK, and their response is, we'll remove you within 14 business days. And I think it really underscored that they knew I was U.S.-based, based on other criteria, but the importance is you have to comply where the consumer or the user resides, not where you have a nexus. So that organization, a large media organization, would have been in violation of CAN-SPAM as well as CASL, as well as regulations in many other areas of the world. So they may have been in compliance where they resided, but effectively they could be held accountable in the U.S. So I think that's a very important part that marketers need to know. Where do your consumers reside?
And of course, the good news, of course, is that real time is compliant everywhere.
Right. So if you look if you're looking for a global solution, like Derek said, technology today, platforms today, unless you have some sort of crazy affiliate and you're doing uploads and downloads, there's really no reason that you cannot achieve a real-time unsubscribe.
one of my favorites there, James, unsubscribe header.
So the unsubscribe header, and here's where, for some folks this may get a little technical, and we've referenced an RFC as well. But as I look around at platform offerings, this is something that I see that is built in, and doesn't really require the marketer to have any coding knowledge. This isn't coding or scripting or anything of that. But having the list adopting the list unsubscribe header is key. And basically it's a mechanism that allows for an automated unsubscribe that's easily identified. I think if we watch the news about the big inbox providers like Gmail, Microsoft, recently we saw Gmail made some moves with where we see the unsubscribe link when the list unsubscribe header information is used, and we see that it's right up there in the header. And a lot of people initially came to me and said, oh my gosh, James, this is really going to, you're putting the list unsubscribe right up there. This is really going to cause some awful list attrition for me. But what we've seen over time, and when we started looking at more statistical analysis of this, what we've seen that it's actually kind of helped, and I'll frame that up for you. The way it's helped out is that before, if a user, and I can go back to all the points I've gone over, the readability, the clear and conspicuous, the constant branding, if they don't see that, they don't see that unsub mechanism in an email, but they want to stop the email, they're going to mark you as spam. So they, using this list unsubscribe header, and I think we brushed through had a screenshot of an example there. Using that, the inbox providers like Gmail, Microsoft, even the ISPs, Comcast, Verizon, folks like that, they love it because they know that they can take that and in their own environment make that clear and conspicuous. We see here, I don't know how well that's coming through on folks' screen, but if we see the little blue box that's outlined there in the property screen, we see the list, the dash unsubscribe header, and how that's actually formatted, or will send an email to that address there. A very powerful thing.
Great. Again, as James mentioned, it's a very simple thing. It does not add any costs. And most ESPs, this is enabled by default. So as we go through and look at our audit results, it is surprising that leading brands, it doesn't have this. So again, it is a best practice unless you don't want to enable consumers easy of getting off your list.
Right, and I will add real quick, I will add that, it's not going to botch up anything in your email, and by that I mean it's not going to, that piece of code is not going to show up in the to or from section of what a user would see, and really would only be seen if somebody is actually looking at the header of your email or the full source code of that email. So it's also important to remember when we're working with our creative teams, if we're discussing implementation of that it is not going to affect the appearance in any way of your email.
Key point.
All right.
Derek,
so
learn and listen. What can we learn?
Yeah, the final one is about learning and listening, and this is an area that I think the companies that are most progressive, that are moving forward the best, are really stepping away from the crowd. One thing to mention first is it's not appropriate and should not be a requirement to fill in a survey as part of unsubscription. That is a CAN-SPAM violation. However, we do recommend that it is a best practice to make a survey, collecting information about why customers are opting out, part of your unsubscription process. And we think there's two values to that. It is an opportunity to further interact with your customers, to improve the experience, and to be able to learn from their experience of your program and make improvements in the future. And we think that's a really powerful opportunity, and it's a way to move unsubscription from potentially a negative into a positive for the overall program. And then we've got an example here from Mozilla, which I think hits all the right notes. I mean, it says very clearly, you've been unsubscribed. There's no question. There's no further step. This is not a mandatory thing that you have to do. But it does ask, and it gives room for free-form entry as well as selection, so they can collect statistical data about why people are unsubscribing. And as James mentioned earlier, there may be opportunities here still to recover the relationship and recover the engagement. If, for example, someone says they're receiving too many emails and you have an opportunity or a solution for that, you may still be able to recover the relationship. So we think this is a great example.
Yeah, and from an operation perspective, Derek, one of the things I liked about this one is it allowed me to click on multiple options here as well as the other. Many of them that we experience, it only gives you one choice. I mean, maybe the mail wasn't relevant and I get too many. So it shouldn't be one versus the other. So I think this is, again, a good example of one of them that we came across to consider. So let's, sorry for the jumping here, let's jump to the survey results. So here's the 10 best practices. We weighed them all equally for this purpose of this report, and then details are in the report that we published and released 2 weeks ago. So we're going to very quickly go through some of the top-level findings and discuss the learnings and some of the observations. So first of all, the good, the bad, the ugly. 90% of the brands were in compliance with CAN spam and CASL. But this is concerning. 10% of the largest, the most powerful brands in the world are not in compliance. And this is that they did not honor and unsubscribe within 11 days. We were generous. We gave an additional day just in case there was a timing based on when we clicked the unsubscribe in their server. This definitely has concern from regulatory authorities. And clearly, we've been asked to provide more information. Our role is only to highlight those companies that are doing best practices, so we will not disclose who are not. But they clearly have the mechanism to come back and test there. So you should make sure you are in compliance. And getting back to Derek's earlier point, immediate is the best practice. Why wait? We're going to go through here some variances. We looked at the top 100 retailers, which start as Amazon at some $68 billion in revenue, to the second 100, where the smallest one was only $118 million. And I think it's very important to note this is a limited test. It was a test during the August time frame. Variances can occur based on seasonality. And we did not have the resources to do a thorough analysis of the longer tail. But clearly, these are the largest brands that have the most robust infrastructure. And one of the challenges is the outliers. And it's always these exceptions that creates the challenges. And I can tell you in our briefings, every regulator that we met with all came up with a personal example of the small fonts or the extra spaces between the body and the footer. And unfortunately, those outliers are overshadowing the good work of the industry. And this ranges from poor practices, illegal practices, to some which I would say is disingenuous, to also lack of operational discipline. The disingenuous are the ones that are complying with the letter of law but have gone to extreme steps to obfuscate, to make it extremely difficult to find the link, to read the link. And so that's clearly the disingenuous. I will tell you, of the 10% that failed to honor the unsubscribe, I would say majority of them, if not all of them, it's the operational discipline. These are legitimate companies. They just are not testing the operational side of unsubscribe on a per mail-in basis. And I recognize that things break, but that's not really an excuse. So this is a real key call to action here. So let's look at the regulatory sample in here. Just to let you know, as a report indicated, 10.1% failed to honor the unsubscribe. We did not see any variance between the top 100 and the second 100 here. But that's what we looked at, is only a variation over 1%. Again, what we would certainly be interested in going forward, and we're hoping to get some grant funding, to actually look at a much longer tail maybe the top 1,000 retailers or marketers or some sorts there. As we look at the actual best practices, now this slide ties to what Derek and James walked through. I'll walk you through very quickly. The first column, again, the first 100 is the top 100 e-commerce sites based on revenue as of December 31st of 2013, and the second 100 is the second largest there. So in some cases, we see large variances between the two. Now the good news here, this is the good part of the good, bad, and the ugly, is almost 70% have adopted 8 or more of the best practices outlined. And this is really a strong testament that our best practices are achievable, obtainable, and really effectively are industry standards. And there's a question I received is, what was the regulator's response and how they view this? Well, when regulators look at best practices that are broadly adopted, that becomes the new bar that they start thinking about. So I highly encourage you to be thinking about those areas. As we go through these, the easy read and the size and the color, the confirmation pages, obviously the overwhelming majority of those sites are doing a great job, at 97%, 95%. So when we think about those poor contrast ones, that's an exception, and that's one that that's the example of the outlier concept. So as we go down further here, we can see some others, all the way down to, I think, the no delay in removal. So what that is actually is, do we receive any mail after we unsubscribe? So the good news is 82.5%, after we hit that unsubscribe, we did not receive any mail after that next day. And gets back to Derek's earlier point, that's pretty achievable. If 82.5% of the largest companies can do it, why can't you? And that's, you want to be able to answer that question if you're not doing it. What we did find interesting is the variances of 7.5 or 7.6%. The clear and conspicuous, this is where we still, we look at, well, 20% aren't doing that. And that becomes a concern. And a variance of 14%. So it's actually interesting, the largest of the sites have less clear and conspicuous unsubscribed footers. And then the unsubscribe header here, again, as James mentioned, this is something very simple to do. It does not affect your outbound mail systems whatsoever. Only 75, 76%. That was disappointing to see that. Again, that's not something that's a compliance requirement, but it clearly is a best practice to better enable consumers and ultimately improve your overall performance. I think the most concerning one was this last one here, was, again, optional customer feedback. As Derek mentioned, this is something you get a tremendous amount of data, yet only 25% of the sites are asking for that. I actually want to just kind of go back to James and Derek and some of your insights on this perspective yourself.
I think the lower ones at the end here show the operational inertia, the complexity that it takes at larger organizations to get some of these apparently relatively simple tasks done. But I agree, things like the unsubscribe header, with the importance that Gmail plays today for most marketers, and the fact that Gmail, that is the only unsubscription mechanism, there's no additional feedback loop. I think any marketer today should look at the unsubscribe header as a de facto mandatory requirement, and if it's something that they're not doing today, they should absolutely get on top of immediately. I also think the results as a whole are a great benchmark that companies can look at how they're doing and compare themselves and see how they're doing against the industry. I think it's very, very useful from that perspective.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, specifically around the unsubscribe header, because it's such a simple, unobtrusive thing to do, and, knowing that a lot of platforms offer that by default. The number was a little bit surprising as much as it was a little kind of disappointing to see that. And again, speaking to the fact of this being a benchmark, and maybe in some cases a wake-up call. I think a lot of us went through a wake-up call when CASEL was coming into effect and the steps that we had to take to work towards compliance there. But really, after 10 years, coming back, revisiting that, seeing some of these numbers, really shows the need that we need to move past just, a checklist. Yeah, we're doing that, we're doing that, we're doing that, and really looking into how are you doing it, and is it effective, and is it really on the surface something you would consider as a best practice?
So James, would you kind of? I was just going to introduce. Go ahead, Derek.
Sorry about that. I just wanted to touch on the 10% non-compliance with canned spam and underscore that I don't think that any of these companies are deliberately flaunting canned spam. I think it is a testament to the fact that it is difficult to regularly and repeatedly test your unsubscription processes. You set them up, you believe they're working, but it is necessary. It should be an absolute wake-up call for companies to check end-to-end that their unsubscription process works and to test it on a regular basis. Otherwise, these kinds of non-compliances will occur, and that's not okay today. That's not acceptable in today's environment.
Right. Speaking it from that sense, I'd rather have the call-out be, or the wake-up call be this, and not the wake-up call be an enforcement action or a consent decree from the FTC, right? And it's something that we overlook so much. And yeah, we can go back and we can look at the enforcements that have come from the FTC, and we can, we might want to bank on that, like the chances are slim. But what is that doing then for your brand? And tying it back into one of the first questions we asked when we started this webinar was, what does an unsubscribe mechanism have to do with the Online Trust Alliance? Well, consumer choice, which is what this boils down to, is a great avenue of gaining trust in your brand, trust in the online community. And so when I think about it in those terms, such a small portion as an unsubscribe link in an email plays a pretty big role, not only because it's a law and spelled out in legislation, but because it's a tool that leads to trust.
If I can add, I think, a few observations and just some additional insights here and some questions. Of those companies that did not, that 10%, or effectively 20%, we actually submitted 2 unsubscribe requests to them. So it's, again, if after 10 days we still didn't get it. What was really concerning is we also sent mails to abuse, postmaster, PR, and CEO at those 20 companies. Only a quarter of them responded, which is very troubling. It means they are not monitoring those mailboxes. And of those 25%, 2 organizations responded within an hour of the email. One of which proceeded to schedule a call that night with their operations team. They're very concerned. So that was, to Derek's point, they were not, this was a breakdown that they were not aware of. They were very concerned. They had a live meeting. They were showing me the results. They were concerned. They wanted to be, they wanted us to rescore them, in effect. They want to be on the list of companies that are adhering to best practices. So they're very concerned. But it's the other 75% that are not responding to those emails. And I understand those things, but here it is, an organization's trying to help them, and they don't have a vehicle to take feedback is concerning. That, again, and those companies have not adjusted since then. So that's certainly a wake-up call as well on there. Let me go and jump to, we have a few minutes left here. I do want to kind of share some other, you guys, it was mentioned earlier about companies that are sending confirming emails. And I will tell you, this has had a spirited debate among our working group and our discussion boards and such here. So roughly 5% of companies sent confirming emails after the fact. So you unsubscribed. James had an example, a great branding example, and it's depending upon the countries you're in, that could or could not be a violation. So that's as clear as concern, but perhaps even more so, we received this one, and again, not only did they confirm it wasn't a mistake, and then they're saying, but also you can receive a 10% back discount if you resubscribe. In this case here, I think there is a unanimous determination, as well as from regulators, that this would be considered a promotional email because you have an incentive in this case here. Derek, do you have any more thoughts on this one?
I think we, is he on?
Yes, I am. Sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that has been mentioned. Sending an email after you've unsubscribed somebody is potentially a violation of CASL, including a promotion is particularly prone to being considered a violation. But more importantly, I think it's something that consumers typically don't accept. If you look at the numbers, you'll see much higher complaint rates from post-unsubscribe emails, and that potentially damages your reputation and potentially damages your ability to continue to market to your customers. So I think it's unnecessary. It has no benefit or little benefit, and as a practice, companies should discontinue.
So there's some other observations we observed. Was not a design goal of the research, but it was interesting. 2% of these largest companies, we never received any mailing from them. And so it could mean that their subscribe mechanisms weren't working. It could mean that possibly during the 6 weeks which we monitored, they was out of their sequence. So that was kind of concerning. So obviously, not only do you want to test your unsubscribes, you want to test your subscribe practices on a regular basis. Not surprisingly, these are e-retail sites. So roughly 29% offered a promo code or discount. One area we had a lot of debate on, and we had a few minutes to touch on real quick, is a double opt-in. So 8% or 7.9% required consumers to click on the link to confirm that they had subscribed. And that round trip or confirmed opt-in is advocated by some, but also has a lot of drawbacks in other areas. Derek, do you have any thoughts on that, or James?
I think it's something that works for some situations. There are certainly situations where companies are potentially having list hygiene issues where they choose to use confirmed opt-in, and we think if that works for them, that's an excellent approach. It should also be noted that 85% use a notified opt-in, that is a single opt-in and then a notification email that gives you an opt-out link. We think that that's also a good option for many companies. And really it comes down to what is your specific situation, how is your list, and are there reasons that you should be moving to a confirmed opt-in. We think it's great, but we think, as you say, it has some downsides as well.
Yeah, speaking from experience, adding an extra step to the subscription process does tend to be a little bit of a list killer, if you will, for lack of better words. But, as Derek indicated, sending that confirmation out, hey, thanks for signing up, and immediately providing an unsub mechanism on that communication, we've seen way better results. But, I do know that adding that extra step, a lot of people are at that point, you're like, you know what, just forget it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not, I think there's another aspect of that, of having a double opt-in. It's often those can end up in a spam or a bulk folder, and consumers can just delete them. They're overloaded. So I think that's a balance there. And I think the important part of this confirmation email is that it's not, here's your promotional newsletter that you sign up for, and then the bottom. This is basically a very specific confirmation that 85% of them have adopted. Thank you for signing up, our newsletter, and then, if this was a mistake or something of that nature. So I think that is a best practice. Obviously, there are some very strong points of view on both of these, but again, there are pros and cons, and I think that's something to work with your email marketing agency or service provider based on your customer demographics, your products, what makes sense for you. So I do want to, as we wrap up, what's next here? As I mentioned earlier, is that for this evaluation and for listing of the companies that have been named to the honor roll for email marketing best practices, which you can find in the report of page 12, those companies scored 80% or better, we weighted everything the same. What we are now is in the process over the next 2 months, we're going to be looking at the weighting of those and changing that to be on a 100-point scale. That data will be integrated into our annual Online Trust Honor Roll, which evaluates site security, brand protection, privacy practices, privacy policy. We evaluate over 850 leading websites. So this data will be integrated into that as a new criteria of really how trustworthy is that brand. And so looking at the end-to-end consumer experience. So, and that information is currently on our site, and we certainly welcome feedback in that. And through part of OTA's mission is we're continuing to go outreach. I do want to express support of many of the companies, those on the call today, as well as other organizations such as the Email Service from Provider Coalition, the Online Publishers Association, that really the brands that consumers are dealing with, that really have stepped up and are embracing these, and we really are calling that other trade organizations really embrace these best practices, because we think the benefit is to consumers, obviously, but also to the industry. Self-regulation is better than regulation, and we want to promote innovation and the integrity of email and the channel. So we do have lots of resources here. We are at the top of the hour. We will stay on the call here to try to address some of the questions that have come up. But I do want to thank everyone for participating in today's call. And Derek and James have agreed to stay on for a few more minutes, and we'll try to go through the questions here. The reports and such are on our website. And again, encourage you to download, encourage you to consider supporting our efforts. Obviously, we can only do these type of events and research projects through funding, which relies on leadership of companies in the industry and organizations, so we certainly welcome that feedback. And again, these resources are here for you. So again, thank you very much for participating today, and I'm going to try to go through the questions in just a moment.